Welcome to the Action Lab Leadership Podcast, the show where we have honest, unfiltered conversations with business leaders. I'm Danny, the founder of Action Lab Leadership, and today the format is going to be a little bit different. Typically, I'm joined by a guest and we have an interview and a great conversation. Today is a solo episode where I want to talk about some of the leadership ideas that have been on my mind lately. And the one I want to talk about today is motivation. Now, if you're listening to this podcast, chances are you're probably a highly motivated person. Whether you're an individual contributor, a manager, or a business owner, if you're listening to a podcast like this, you're motivated. You get stuff done. You take action. Even so, if you're like me, you've probably got some areas of your business or some areas of your life that you're struggling to get going. You're waiting for motivation. You need a little kick in the pants sometimes, right? And the problem with waiting for motivation to show up, like some of us do in these areas, is that we keep waiting and waiting and waiting. And in all that time that we're waiting for motivation to show up, we're not taking action. We're not doing anything. We're not making any progress. So today, what I want to do is talk about something called the cycle of motivation and how you can create more motivation yourself instead of waiting for it to show up. And so there are 5 parts of the cycle of motivation. And part number 1 is optimism. Optimism is the starting point. And you may think, well, why would that be the starting point of motivation? Well, here's the reason. If you are optimistic about how something will turn out, you're much more likely to take action and get started. But if you're pessimistic about the outcome of something, if you're pessimistic about how this project is going to turn out or what that task is going to be like, it's a whole lot harder to get started. So optimism is a place where everything begins when it comes to motivation. And optimism is a great word, and people might think, oh, that's great, cool, optimism. How the heck do we become more optimistic about this stuff? And so I want to share 2 quick tips for how you can build more optimism on a consistent basis just in business in general, right? The first is to ask yourself the question, what if? Typically, the way that a human brain works in our psychology, we are wired for negativity and wired to avoid loss. And so we typically will ask, what if negative outcome? What if this fails? What if I don't succeed? What if I fall on my face? What if negative outcome? What if negative outcome? What if worst case scenario? That's the way that our brains typically work. But what you can do is intentionally flip the script and ask yourself, what if with a positive outcome? What if this turns out better than we could have expected? What if our team grows from this? What if this is the first step to the next big leap in the business? What if positive outcome? And this, if you do consistently, over time, again and again, you start wiring your brain to be more optimistic more often. Because we fall into negativity, we need to move intentionally into optimism. And this is one of the questions that you can ask yourself on a regular basis in order to become more optimistic. Now, the other tip that I have is the way that you start your day. Typically, most people, they wake up, the first thing they do is they reach for their phone. And they look at texts and social media and news and email and all that stuff. But the problem is, the moment that you read that stuff, your brain has to react. And how often, when you look at your phone first thing in the morning, do you see stuff that you're excited about? Do you see things that make you happy? Typically, it's the opposite. It's stuff that stresses you out and makes you anxious and makes you angry, makes you upset, makes you defensive, makes you fill in the blank. So the recommendation here is to start your day by not looking at your phone. And for some of you, this may be a fairly easy thing to do. Some of you, this may be really, really hard. So start with 15 or 30 minutes. When you wake up in the morning, that first 15 to 30 minutes, don't look at your phone. Don't look at any of those things. Fill that time with something else. It could be whatever you want. Fill that time with exercise, going on a walk, reading a business book, enjoying a cup of coffee out on the porch while the sun rises, whatever that is, fill that with something else. And then once you have kind of set your own mental foundation for the day, after that 30 minutes, go back to your phone and open it up. Now, all that stuff is still going to be there, but you have now created a foundation for yourself. And when you do read all that negative stuff, whether it's from the news or in email or text or social media or anywhere else, you're less likely to be as reactive to it. And so those are the two ways to build optimism more consistently in life on a regular basis. It's what if positive outcome and start your day without your phone. Neither of these are an overnight fix. You can't just do this for a day and then you are optimistic about absolutely everything. But if you do this over a long enough period of time, it makes a massive difference in the way that you feel about your business, you feel about your projects, you feel about your family, you feel about everything else. It's building that consistent optimism. So that is part number 1 of the cycle of motivation. Part number 2, action. We can't think our way through change. We have to be able to take action. And for me, action is so important. That's why I put it in the name of this company, Action Lab Leadership. We have to be able to take action. That's obvious, but sometimes you may think, okay, well, I'm struggling to take action. So how do I do it? I have a tip to make it a little bit easier. You're probably looking at your project, the thing that you need to do, and it feels too big. Feels like it's too much work to do. What I recommend is taking your first step and shrinking it down smaller and smaller and smaller until it's so small that it would be ridiculous to not do it. So, for example, let's say the thing that you don't have the motivation to do is creating a new employee manual for your business. Okay, well, creating an employee manual seems like a big step. So make the first step smaller. Can you create one section? Still feel too big? Okay, make it a little bit smaller. Could you create a page? Still feel too big? Okay, make it a little bit smaller. Could you write a paragraph? Oh, okay, paragraph, that's easy. Of course you could do a paragraph. Write the paragraph. Then once you've written it, it's so much easier to write the next one. And so much easier to write the next one and the next one. The whole idea is instead of looking at the giant project, chunk it down into something so small, it would be ridiculous to not write a paragraph or to not write a sentence. Just start there. And it makes it so much easier to take the next action. Now, sometimes people, and I like to point this out, think that motivation comes first and then you take action. But in this cycle, you'll see action comes first. First, you have optimism and then you have action. And motivation is not going to come until later. Action always comes before the motivation. So you're not waiting for it to show up. So those are the first 2 steps, optimism, action. Number 3 in the cycle of motivation is consistency. Consistency is super important. Now, sometimes we can be lacking in consistency on anything that we're doing. And so we try to make up for it with intensity by doing a whole lot of it all at once, right? And this can maybe jumpstart you sometimes, but more often than not, consistency is more important than intensity. And I want to share an example here. Let's say that there are 2 people who are trying to get fit with their exercise. And so they want to do push-ups. Now, one person does 20 push-ups a day for 30 days. And the other person does 600 push-ups in one day. Who gets better results? It's the person who did 20 push-ups a day for 30 days. It's the exact same number of reps between these 2 people. It's exact same output. But when it's done consistently over a longer period of time, the results are better. Now, if you're struggling with consistency, here's a tip to help you make it easier to become more consistent. And it's a concept that I heard last year that I absolutely loved. And this is a sentence. You can suck, but you can't skip. What does this mean? I'm going to use the example of exercise again, because I think it's a really helpful example when it comes to some of these things with motivation. And the person who shared this was an entrepreneur, and he had said that there are days that he just doesn't feel like working out. He doesn't feel like it at all. But what he'll do, instead of not working out at all, he'll go down into the gym. Maybe he'll get on the elliptical for 5 to 10 minutes and then be done and walk out of the gym and leave. He sucked, right? It wasn't a good workout. It wasn't super intense, but he didn't skip it. And sometimes we get into this all or nothing thought process, right? If I have an hour workout as my ideal workout, an hour exercise, and I only have 20 minutes, maybe I say, well, it's not worth it because I can't do my full hour, so I'll just do nothing. But the problem is 20 minutes is way better than nothing. And so the whole idea here is to continue showing up day in and day out on the thing. You can suck at it and do very small bits of it, but you can't skip it. And it sounds simplistic when you hear that, but when you start incorporating the idea of I can suck, but I can't skip, it makes it so much easier to do something. When you combine that idea with make the first step so small, it would be ridiculous to not do it. Those two things together are really powerful to take action and do it consistently. Take action and do it consistently. So that is one of the ways and the kind of mantras you can use to make consistency a little bit easier for you. So we've covered optimism, we've covered action, we've covered consistency. The next part that you get from all of these things is momentum. Now, here's the interesting thing about momentum, whether it's in business or in life or anywhere else, it's a powerful tool to have on your side because when we have momentum, it feels like we can accomplish anything. It feels like nothing can get in our way. But when we don't have momentum at all and we feel kind of just like stuck in one spot, even the smallest little problems can feel insurmountable. And so one of the metaphors that I like to think about here is if you imagine a train on train tracks and it's got momentum and it is going down the tracks at full speed and you have a brick wall that you put on the tracks, what's going to happen? The train's going to hit the brick wall, bust right through the other side and keep on going. That's the power of momentum. In that same example, if you have a train that's stopped on the tracks and you put a tiny little 1-inch block in front of the train and it tries to go, it's not going anywhere. Even though it's just a tiny little 1-inch block, it's going to be so difficult for that train to go anywhere and require so much energy because it doesn't have momentum. So when you are optimistic and you take action and you do it consistently, it creates this sense of momentum. Then once you have momentum, at that point, that is where motivation kicks in. Motivation is the final stage in the cycle of motivation. Typically, people think it's at the very beginning. It's not. It's at the end. And the interesting thing about this and what I love is when you look at this cycle, if you imagine this as one big circle where you start with optimism, you go around, and with motivation, you get to optimism again. Those first three parts of that cycle, optimism, action, and consistency, those three things are entirely within your control. All of them. When you wait for motivation to show up, none of that's in your control. You're just waiting and hoping and wishing. But optimism, action, and consistency are entirely in your control. And the great part about this is you go through the cycle and you get to the end and you're feeling motivated. When you're feeling motivated, it's easier to be optimistic. And when you're optimistic, it's easier to take action, and so on and so forth. And so it's a circle, and it's almost like a flywheel that keeps spinning faster and faster and faster and faster. And that's the whole idea here with motivation and the cycle of motivation is controlling the things that you can control, moving forward on them instead of waiting for life to, this feeling of motivation to magically show up. Now, sometimes things are going to be going well for you. You've got the optimism, you're taking action, you're doing it consistently, the momentum, everything's spinning on this cycle and in this flywheel. And then life happens and it feels like it all comes crashing down. Well, I had an example like that I want to share with you here is, I've told this story before on different stages and different podcasts, but my wife and I had the opportunity a couple of years ago to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. And we were in the training process of that trip before we went because we wanted to prepare ourselves as best as possible to make success as likely as we could getting to the top of that mountain. And so it was a few months out from the trip, and that's the point where the training is in highest gear and you're really getting after it. And we were doing all those things. We were getting outside and doing the miles and we were consistent and we were super optimistic about it. We had that momentum. Everything was running. And then we got COVID. And this wasn't like I got a couple sniffles COVID. This was, it knocked us on our asses for a couple of days straight, couldn't do anything COVID. That was the the way that we experienced it this time around. And we were forced to stop. The whole motivation thing came crumbling down for us. And we were forced to stop training for 2 weeks to let our bodies rest and recover. Now, it would have been really easy once that 2 weeks was over and we were ready to get back into it for us to struggle with motivation and be like, oh, I don't know, I'm not really feeling it. And oh, I don't know, I'll wait for some motivation to show up, or I'll wait till I feel a little bit more excited about it. We could have waited and we could have let that 2 weeks turn into 3 weeks and turn into 4 weeks and turn into 2 months. But we didn't, because we understood this concept. And so as soon as we were able physically to get back into it again and start training, we did. We got ourselves into an optimistic mindset about we will get back to the place that we were and we will keep moving forward. And we got out there and we started training. Now, when we did, we also recognized that we weren't at the level that we were at before. We weren't as strong as we were before. We didn't have as much endurance as we did before. And that was okay. Instead of being upset about that, instead of kind of mentally punishing ourselves for that, we recognized it and said, just keep moving forward, keep staying consistent. And we got back into it. And eventually, a few weeks later, we got back to the place we were, and then we exceeded it. And that's the important lesson here, is we all have those moments where it feels like stuff is not going our way. It feels like life happens and things come crashing down and we just kind of get stuck in the mud a little bit. And if we can recognize when that happens and put our minds back to this cycle and get back into optimism and action again, that is how we stay more motivated on a regular basis. That's how we accomplish more goals in our businesses. And that's how we show up in our businesses and our lives as a leader, that other people can look toward us and they can see there's a person that knows how to build motivation. There's a person who stays consistent over the long term. They don't let the things in life stop them and prevent them from continuing forward. And that's what I want to help you with here. And that's how I want to wrap up today's episode. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation, I guess this solo conversation with myself about the idea of motivation. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to subscribe and send this episode to someone that you think might need it or might enjoy it. Now go out there, take action in your business, and become the leader that your team needs you to be.